Unexpected events can knock on the door at any time. Laid off today, and rent is still due next week? Car engine failure? They say your pet will be fine, but only after a $2,000 deposit? And yes, the best way to manage those risks is an emergency fund. But if you still treat your emergency fund like a simple savings of 3 to 6 months of income, you are ignoring the complex reality of risk. Today, we are going to get nerdy. We are going to deconstruct the emergency fund, not as a generic stash of cash, but as a self-structured fund with one single job: to mitigate risk in your future. First, we will begin by redefining the risk we target to manage. Second, set up a personalized, tailored approach to determine the appropriate size of the fund. Third, develop a strategic asset allocation for where to keep that money. By the end of this video, you will have a strategic framework designed to keep you out of the debt cycle. So to build it correctly, we first need to understand what we are protecting. Think of yourself as a publicly traded company. You have a primary asset, your ability to work, and your paycheck is similar to a dividend every 2 weeks. Let's call this your income stock. Just like a public company, your goal is to manage this income stock to be as stable as possible. The question is, what brings instability? More precisely, what are the events that bring instability to your income stream? It could be a layoff, fewer hours, or a missed contract. When this happens, your income stock crashes. Or it could be an external shock, an unexpected event that eats up a large portion of your monthly paychecks. It is like someone stole your income. A person who is prepared can transform these shocks into a manageable setback. But for those who do not have this fund, just like a company with poor risk management shuts down, it's no different for an individual. It triggers what we call a financial debt spiral. The logic of the spiral is brutal. You lose your job. You use credit cards to survive. You max them out. Now you are paying 20+% interest, and the powerful compounding effect starts working against you. Naturally, the next logical step is to try to get a loan to stop the bleeding. And this brings us to the cruel irony of the banking system. Banks love to lend you money in sunny days, when you don't need it. But the moment you need it the most, they slam the door. When you lose your income, you statistically become a high-risk borrower. Lenders will either decline you or approve you at predatory interest rates. This is how you get drafted into the debt cycle league. And once you are in, it is incredibly expensive to get out. With a clear understanding of what we are protecting, the next step is to determine how much capital you actually need. This is where we move from theory to practice. Now, the standard advice is to save 3 to 6 months of expenses. This is a decent starting point, but it is far too generic and vague. It relies on averages. It assumes all risks are identical. It assumes a tenured professor faces the exact same possibility of income shock as a freelance software engineer in startup. To make this effective, we need precision. That's why we're going to divide your emergency fund into 2 distinct parts based on inherently different risk types. One for income shocks, such as losing your job, and another for expense shocks, such as large, unexpected bills. This separation of risk approach allows us to tailor the fund to the specific threats you face. Let's start with the income shock. The goal of this fund is to handle only job loss situations. The key here is recognizing that not everyone faces the same level of income shock risk. Your personal exposure depends on your profession and industry. If you are a government employee or a tenured professor, you are like a utility stock. Your income is resilient and predictable. But if you work in tech, sales, or at a startup, you are a growth stock. Your income might be higher, but it is prone to sudden crashes. Your income could drop to zero overnight. Why does this distinction matter? Because it will dictate which type of risk you need to focus more on. Put more weight. If you are like the growth stock, the tech worker or freelancer, your risk of income discontinuity is higher, so your income shock fund needs to be your primary fortress. However, if you are the utility stock, the government worker, your risk of losing your income is statistically low. Instead, you might weight your portfolio more heavily toward the expense shock fund, which we will discuss later. You might even have the luxury of managing that fund more actively. But for now, let's assume you need to protect your income shock. And here is 5 steps to determine the fund size. Step 1. Iron base. First, we establish the iron base. Review your actual spending over the last 6 months. We need to strip out the noise, remove the one-time purchases, cut back significantly on discretionary items, reduce dining out, delivery, and shopping. What remains is your bare-bones baseline, the essentials such as rent or mortgage, groceries, utilities, insurance, scheduled payment on car or student loan, etc. This figure represents your absolute monthly burn rate in a crisis. Step 2. Future adjustment. Next, look forward, not just backward. Reflect on any upcoming changes in your life that could alter your basic expenses. Are you planning to have a child soon? Getting married soon? Not wedding costs, but how your bare-bone living expenses will shift. If yes, your iron base needs to reflect that future reality, not just your past history. Only you can gauge these marginal adjustments. Step 3. Confidence adjustment. Then, ask yourself, how quickly do you think you could land another job? If you are in a hot job market with a strong network, you might feel comfortable with just 3 months' worth. But if the outlook is uncertain, if you have no clue how long it might take, you must aim for 6 months or more to play it safe. Be conservative on this. When and if you lose your job because of an overall economic downturn, the temperature of the job market cools down quickly. Step 4. Sanity buffer adjustment. Now we add the behavioral cushions. Job loss isn't just a financial hit, it is a major stressor. If your fund only covers the absolute basics, your quality of life could plummet. No more small treats, no Netflixing, just eggs and carrots day after day. That kind of austerity can lead to burnout or depression at a time when you need to stay sharp and energetic. To avoid this, add a cushion of 20% to 30% on top and have some steak and wine. Remember, this period could be a pivotal moment in your life. You want to emerge stronger, turning it into an opportunity rather than a setback. Step 5. Upskilling cushion. Finally, in today's fast-changing job market, you might need to invest in yourself to bounce back. Perhaps learning new tools like AI applications. You might need to travel to a conference to network. Add a flat 5% to 10% buffer to cover these costs. This ensures that you can pay for your own evolution without dipping into your essentials or worrying about making rent. Now, you have all the basic elements to firm up the income shock fund size through these steps. Get the iron base and add future adjustment, then multiply by confidence adjustment. Make a further adjustment factoring in sanity buffer and upskilling cushion. Now, you have a fund size that not only frees you to focus on job hunting, but also skill building while maintaining a reasonable standard of living. Now let's shift to expense shocks. In this scenario, your paycheck keeps coming in, but suddenly you are facing a large, immediate outflow of cash. Unlike income shocks, where the problem is a halt in cash inflow, expense shocks are all about unexpected outflows. Traditional advice lumps everything together under that generic 3 to 6 months umbrella. But that is not helpful here. The risks are fundamentally different, and so is the way we size this emergency fund related to it. To illustrate, consider a classic example. Your car breaks down. But do you drive an older model that is prone to issues, or a newer one still under warranty? Are you a DIY mechanic who can grab parts from a local auto store and fix it with some elbow grease? Or does the car feel like a mysterious black box where a strange noise equals a $1,000 bill? Or is it an electric vehicle? Answering these helps you estimate the potential bill and is different for all. But the most critical question is, do you have alternatives? Could you rely on public transit in walking distance, like a bus or subway, not to miss work? Or does your family have a spare vehicle you could borrow temporarily? If the answer is yes, then a breakdown is merely an annoyance. But if the answer is no, if your job absolutely requires reliable transportation, this is a catastrophe. Now the problem is, an unlimited number of scenarios might flow into your mind. A roof leak? A refrigerator breakdown? To sort through the noise, pay attention to potential events that can disrupt your income-earning activity. It is important to distinguish between pure expenses and events that trigger a chain reaction leading to an income shock. And these events are different for everyone. For you, a car breakdown with no alternatives might trigger an income shock if you can't go to work for an unknown number of days straight, but a refrigerator breakdown won't. If you are a remote software developer, car breakdown don't matter much, but your laptop dying puts you one step closer to an income shock. You get the idea. Let's stop guessing and divide these shocks into 2 distinct risk types. Here's how to determine your expense shock fund size. 1. Chain effect risks, events that trigger income shock. This requires proactive thinking and is worth your cognitive energy. Start by brainstorming all the possible events that could disrupt your core income-generating activities. Use your imagination or even chat with an AI tool for ideas tailored to your situation. Are you a freelancer? What if your high-performance laptop dies? Are you a tradesman? What if your truck gets broken into and essential tools are stolen? Are you a commuter? What if your vehicle engine fails? Your company values you and your clients depend on you. You do not want these events to trigger cascading effect to income shock. The point is to identify the events most relevant to you, those external hits that interrupt your job. Once you have the list of events, estimate the cost to mitigate each one. For some, it might be one specific event. For others, it might be 4 or 5 events. Sum them up. This is the first part of your expense shock fund. This has nothing to do with your 3 to 6 months of expenses. Then there are the events that don't stop your job but drain your wallet, like a roof leak or a medical emergency. Most of these catastrophic events are actually capped by insurance. The real risk to your liquidity isn't the total cost, which could be millions. It is the cap on your liability, specifically your deductible for car or home, or your out-of-pocket maximum for health insurance. You don't need to save for the surgery, you need to save for the deductible. If your roof collapses, you pay the deductible. If you have a medical emergency, you pay up to your max out-of-pocket. Get the list of all your deductibles and select the highest single amount. Then, add this amount to the first part of your expense fund. By summing these two numbers, chain effect risks plus highest deductible, you've got the size of expense shock fund. You have enough cash to replace the laptop so you can keep working, protecting the income, and you have enough cash to cover the gap for a major life event. This removes the guesswork. You aren't saving for a vague, rainy day. You are capitalizing a fund to cover specific tail events in your life. Before, you were aware of nothing but random fear. Now you have defined the risk and are prepared to mitigate it. The only thing you can't control is the timing, but your expense shock fund will guard you when it happens. With our 2 funds defined, you might be wondering, isn't the income shock fund large enough to cover the expense shocks as well? Do I really need 2 separate emergency funds? Mathematically, the income shock fund could cover most expense shocks since they rarely happen simultaneously. What are the chances that you lose your job and your car breaks down in the same week? Statistically, the odds are low. These events are usually independent. But, keeping your income shock and expense shock funds logically separate to ensure your risk management strategy remains robust and your runway remains clear. Now that we have defined the risk and the size, the next question is, where do we keep the money? The guiding principle here is liquidity, the ability to access your funds immediately without a drop in value. To optimize this, we will break your fund into 2 strategic layers. If you are in Canada, put the first $6,000 of your income shock fund directly into a premium checking account at a major bank. Most big banks offer premium checking accounts with full banking services, but they come with a hefty monthly fee of around $30 per month. However, simply by maintaining a minimum balance, usually $6,000, it wipes them out completely. The trade-off of foregoing small interest on $6,000 is much better. By parking your first $6,000 here, you unlock a powerful trade. 0 fees. You save approximately $360 per year in monthly account fees. Credit card rebates. These accounts often rebate the annual fee on a premium credit card, saving approximately $120 to $150 per year. Accelerated rewards. That premium card earns you 3 to 5% cash back on daily essentials compared to the 1% base rate of a free card. You are effectively exchanging the low interest rate of a savings account for premium perks. It is a better return on capital. I cover this trade-off in detail in my Banking Stack 101 video. If you are worried about mingling your emergency fund with your daily spending money and accidentally spending it, don't be. The minimum balance requirement acts as a psychological electric fence. You won't touch that $6,000 for non-emergencies because you know the moment you drop below the limit, the bank will slap you with a fee. For the remaining income shock and the entire expense shock fund, high-interest savings accounts or cashable GICs are the appropriate choices here. Especially for high-interest savings from digital bank is a better choice for 2 reasons. Digital banks typically pay higher interest, but the real benefit is that it engineers friction. By separating this money, you create a barrier. You cannot simply tap a card to buy a new phone. You have to log in and transfer funds. That extra step stops impulse spending. Now that we have built a solid foundation for your emergency fund, Let's indulge in a bit of financial what if. A common question is, why not park this money in something with more upside, like high yield ETFs or large cap stocks? After all, it is liquid enough, right? Are you absolutely wrong to consider it? Not entirely, but as we will explore through some thought experiments, it is a path that demands caution. The general rule of thumb is straightforward: do not double down on risk. Your emergency fund exists to shield you from risky events. Introducing investment volatility into the mix could undermine its very purpose. This is especially true for your income shock fund. Why? Because job loss is highly correlated with the overall economy and the stock market. If we are in a recession, the market crashes often follows, which is exactly when layoffs happen. If you invest this fund in stocks, you risk losing your job and 30% of your income shock fund at the exact same time. That is a disaster. However, expense shocks are different. Events like a broken tooth or a busted truck are usually uncorrelated with the stock market. Your truck doesn't care what the S&P 500 is doing. So yes, if you happen to be risk-take and manage your emergency fund a bit more aggressively, there is a theoretical strategy to optimize yield by treating these two risks differently. Let's run some thought experiments as financial entertainment. And to make this easy, let's walk through an example based on varying risk tolerances. Imagine this profile. If your bare-bones monthly spending is $3,000, then make a future adjustment such as upcoming life changes like marriage or a newborn baby. In this example, assume there are none. Next, make a confident adjustment, say 5 months, so your income shock fund is $15,000 before add any cushions. Now, let's add 20% sanity buffer and a 10% upskilling cushion. That's a combined 30% cushion on $15,000, which gives $19,500. For simplicity in this example, we round that to $20,000. Separately, we estimate the expense shock fund, things like events that trigger income shock and deductibles, at $10,000. Put those together, and your total emergency fund for this profile is $30,000. Now let's walk through 2 ways to manage that $30,000 and why someone might choose one over the other. First, the risk-averse or conservative approach. In plain terms, keep $6,000 in your premium checking account for immediate access and unlock all premium perks at cost of nothing. And place the remaining $24,000 in cashable GICs, high-interest savings in digital bank, or money market funds. The focus is maximum capital preservation. You get peace of mind and almost no volatility aside from inflationary pressure. Second, the risk-taker or aggressive approach. Keep $6,000 in checking, the same for immediate needs, but here's the difference in allocation strategy. Put $14,000, the remainder of the income shock layer, in cashable GICs, high-interest savings in digital bank, or money market funds. And put all your expense shock fund of $10,000 in blue chip stocks or broad index ETFs. That translates roughly to a portfolio split of cash 20%, fixed income 46%, and stocks 34%. Here's the logic behind this bold approach. This setup gives the aggressive market exposure on the expense shock portion. Because money is fungible, the buckets can support each other. If an expense shock, like a car breakdown, hits during a market downturn, you do not have to sell their stocks at a loss. Instead, you can temporarily dip into the fixed income bucket, the income shock fund, to pay for the car. You are effectively betting on the probability that they won't lose their job and have a car breakdown and see a market crash all at the same time. It is a clever pivot, but it requires active management and a strong stomach. For most people, the conservative path is wiser. It keeps the fund's core mission intact without the gamble and rather keep it safe. It is simpler, more secure, and aligns with the fund's protective ethos. So here it is. You have just structured your emergency fund with the sophistication. And remember, life is dynamic, not static. Are you getting married? Expecting a baby? You must reassess and adjust your fund size to reflect your evolving reality. Here is my final 2 cents. Building your emergency fund is only one piece of the puzzle. You should consider the external safeguards available to you. These are resources you should map out before a crisis hits. Severance package. Don't wait until you are let go to understand this. Research what is typical in your industry. In Canada, for example, Common law often dictates more than the statutory minimum. Knowing your entitlements helps you accurately estimate your runway. Government job loss support. Whether it is employment insurance, EI, or other programs, take the time to Google it, use AI for insights, or visit the official government site today. Bookmark the application page so you can apply immediately if you need to. Okay, this is it for this video. Have fun and enjoy the process of actively managing your risks. Good luck building your financial fortress.